Well, good evening. Hope all of you are doing well this evening. In Matthew 18, verses 1 through 4, it says, "At that time the disciples came to Jesus and said, 'Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?' And he called a child to himself and set him before them, and said, 'Truly I say to you, unless you are converted and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever then humbles himself as this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven.'" If we skip one chapter over to Matthew 19, 13, and 14, it says, "Then some children were brought to him, so that he might lay his hands on them and pray. And the disciples rebuked them. But Jesus said, 'Let the children alone, and do not hinder them from coming to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these.'" Tonight, we want to take a look at the gospel through a child's eyes. What is it about children that gives them a leg up on the kingdom? What precisely do we need to learn to emulate about a child so that we too can inherit the kingdom of heaven? In the passage from Matthew 18, the main point is humility. The disciples are vying for the top position, and they want to know who's the greatest in the kingdom. And Jesus says, "Whoever humbles himself as this child, he's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." So the message is that rather than vying for the top position, rather than trying to climb that ladder, so to speak, we need to humble ourselves, make ourselves servants, place ourselves lower. There are some other aspects of children that we can learn from as well. Their innocence, of course, their dependency. A child depends on their parents for everything. We need to learn to depend on our Father the way a child depends on their earthly father. And then there's the simple faith, the simple understanding that they have. In Matthew 11, verse 25, at that time Jesus said, "I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, that you have hidden these things from the wise and intelligent and have revealed them to infants." You know, adults have a tendency to take something that's very simple and make it very complicated. We add layers of complexity to it, sometimes unnecessarily. But there's another thing also that I think we sometimes overlook when we're talking about children as it relates to the kingdom of heaven. Children are naturally a bit naive, and we obviously don't like to be that way. They're going to believe just about anything you tell them, and when it comes to our spiritual lives, we certainly don't want to be gullible. We don't want to be too naive. We don't want to fall for every wind of doctrine. We're told in 1 John 4:1 that we should test the spirits. We have to be on guard and make sure that what we hear matches up with what we already know to be the true Word of God. But in that naivete comes something else, and it's a sense of enchantment and wonder. It's an unquestioning faith. It's the ability to take things at face value without the skepticism and the cynicism that so many of us adults have. We say, yeah, they're naive, and we don't want to be naive, but in that is a faith that we would probably do a lot better if we did have. Y'all know the story of Cinderella, right? Cinderella's evil stepmother won't let her go to the royal ball. She has to stay home. So they leave, and then what happens? Well, then the fairy godmother shows up, gives her a beautiful dress and some glass slippers. The carriage is made from a pumpkin. Some horses are pulling the carriage. It is all so magical. It's all so wonderful. But it comes with a stipulation. You have to be home by midnight. When the clock strikes midnight, it all goes away. And what does Cinderella do? She accepts the offer, right? That's the offer made. She says, yeah, I'll take it without question. Absolutely. Children reading the book or watching the movie, they accept the offer too, without question. Sounds good. I accept. Let's go to the ball. Be back at midnight. Got it. I'm on my way. As adults, put yourself in the story. Put yourself in that situation. Probably got a few questions, don't we? Why midnight? If I'm in this position, why midnight? Tell me, fairy godmother who has magical powers, why are your magical powers constrained by what time of night it is? Why does the clock matter with your magical powers that can turn pumpkins into carriages? Why take something wonderful, this amazing and this awesome, and throw some stipulations on it? They're going to make it bad again. And this is the formula for the fairy tale. Why did it have to be a kiss from a prince that would wake up Sleeping Beauty? Didn't that seem kind of arbitrary? In the original story, the bad fairy enchants the princess so that she will prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die. But there's one fairy who hasn't given her a gift yet, and she attempts to reverse the curse, but she can only do it partially. So that rather than her dying, she simply goes into this deep sleep, and the only thing that can wake her up from that deep sleep is the kiss. Isn't this totally random? Seems a bit arbitrary. What we have here is magic, and it's magic bound by a random set of rules we don't understand and doesn't seem to make much sense. The child accepts it. No questions asked. The child does not feel restricted or offended by the rules of the fairy tale world. They take it at face value. That's just the way it is. Those are just the rules you play by. The adult, however, does not. We've got some questions, don't we? If we're going to live in this world, we need some answers first. We need to make sense of it. We need to know the boundaries. We need to know the limits. We need to know what's possible, what's not possible. We need to know what exactly the rules of the game are, and we need to know why. Explain it. As we grow older, simply accepting the rules gets harder and harder. Our sense of wonder and enchantment fades, and it starts taking a whole lot more to capture our imagination. One author described telling a story to his 3 children. 3 children, tells the same story. One of his children's 8, one is 4, and then one is 1-year-old. To the 8-year-old, he said, Jack walked over to the door. He grabbed the doorknob and turned it, opening the door. And there, on the other side of the door, was a giant dragon. At the mention of the dragon, the 8-year-old's eyes lit up. To the 4-year-old, he said, Jack walked over to the door. He grabbed the doorknob and turned it and opened the door. And the 4-year-old's eyes lit up. And to the 1-year-old, he said, Jack walked over to the door. And the 1-year-old's eyes lit up. The 1-year-old only needs the action of walking to the door to capture their amazement. Wow! He walked to the door. That's so cool. The 4-year-old needs a little bit more. You can't just walk to the door. That's not, who cares? I do that all the time. Open it. Open the door because there's an outside. You got to open that door. That's what's cool. To the 8-year-old, opening the door doesn't matter. I've seen a door opened all the time. It's no big deal. You got to know what's behind the door. There's got to be a dragon behind the door. This is simply the natural progression of growing up. This is our natural inquisitiveness. We never really lose our sense of enchantment and wonder, but as we grow older, it takes more and more to satisfy us. And as we get more that satisfies our imagination, well, then it has to start making sense. And there are rules, and there are structure that has to be followed. You know, it's always interesting reading comic book critics or sci-fi movie reviews, something like that, where they talk about how there are plot holes. The world didn't make sense. There are contradictions within the story. The thing is, the story is completely outlandish. It's set on a distant planet with people who can fly and walk through walls It's a world that's not even close to anything we know. They defy the laws of physics. It defies all rationale is thrown out the window. It's all gone. And then the critic will find some random thing he says didn't add up. It just didn't add up. I wasn't buying that. And they call it a terrible story. They're willing to accept all of this make-believe, all these impossible things about these stories as long as it makes sense. As long as they can examine it, break it all down, stick it under a microscope, analyze every single detail of it, and all the loose ends are tied up. They want to know why, and if they know why, they're okay with it. What's all that have to do with God and Jesus and the Bible? As with everything, God has created the world, and He has created us with balance, right? And what we find in that transition from infancy to childhood to teen to adult is an inquisitiveness and a desire for answers. But at the same time, we never really lose our sense of wonder and enchantment. At least we shouldn't lose it. And God understands that we do want answers. And in the Bible, we're given lots of answers. We find ourselves living in this world asking the question, why? We want to know the parameters of this world. We want to know how it all works, what it all means. We want to know the rules of the game. And God complies. He gives us His word, in which many of our questions are given straightforward answers. Some of our questions are given not so straightforward answers, but rather roundabout answers. And then some of our questions are not answered at all, are they? And what we're left with in this magnificent world, created by God our Father, is enough to satisfy our curiosity and appease our appetite for knowledge, while still maintaining that childlike sense of wonder and enchantment. We're given enough for it to make sense and allow us to make a rational adult choice. But there are rules and stipulations that we're still really not meant to question. Just accept it as it is. Be like that child who just accepts it. Why? Because it's not our world. It's God's. He's the one who made it. What God wants from us is quite simply the faith of a child. That means having a simple faith. It is a faith just like in the fairy tale where we don't question the rules of the game. It just is how it is. And it's so interesting that the Bible starts with that very formula. Adam and Eve in the garden. God gives them everything. Everything is under their control. It's in submission to them. Every tree is theirs to eat from except one. There's that one tree you must not eat from. The child doesn't question it, do they? Don't eat it. That's the rule. Just don't eat it. Whatever happens, it's going to be bad if you eat it. Don't do it. Why? Who knows? I don't know why. I don't know what. Is everything going to explode? Am I going to melt? I don't know. But we're told not to do it, so just don't do it. Don't break the rules. If you do, it's not going to end well. That's the faith God wants from us. That's the attitude that's expected of us. Just don't do it. I don't know why. Just don't. He said don't. As adults, that's a hard attitude to come by, isn't it? Because now that you've said there's that one tree you can't eat from, what's on our minds? Well, why not? Why can't I? What's going to happen? We're looking at that tree, we're examining it, we're thinking about it. Why can't I eat from that tree? What is so special about that particular tree? What's it going to do? What will happen? I need answers. And thousands of years later, we still question the same story. If God didn't want them to eat it, why would He put it there? Why create a perfect world but allow temptation with that tree? Did he know they were going to eat from it, thereby sinning and essentially cause the downfall of man? And if that's the case, why not create mankind as imperfect and fallible from the beginning rather than going through this big old charade of giving him a choice, even though it was never really a choice to begin with? Why go through all that? There are tons of questions surrounding this one single event that starts the entire story. And the fact is, we're not meant to get all the answers. Many of those answers are beyond our grasp and simply aren't meant for us to have. But a lot of people will not accept that. They refuse to live in a world where faith is required and answers are out of our reach. They refuse to live in a world where the pursuit of knowledge is their most important thing and they just can't get that knowledge. There's no wonder, there's no enchantment, there's no faith allowed. If there's a question, it must be answered. If it can be known, it must be known. There's a great exchange that takes place in the book of Job. As we know, Job is in an unimaginable misery. And he's got some questions about this misery. He's trying to figure things out. He's questioning God. And then in chapter 38, God answers some of these questions, verses 3 through 7. He says, "Now, gird up your loins like a man, and I will ask you, and you instruct me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding, who set its measurements, since you know? Or who stretched the line on it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" And God, he continues on in this manner. The point is, you don't know and you can't know. And what's more, there is a legitimate mystery that breeds a needed sense of wonder. He's asking these questions to Job, and Job has to say, I don't know. I can't answer those questions. And God is helping Job realize the legitimacy and the sensibility of human limitation. We delude ourselves into believing that these small, finite, limited brains of ours can know all that should be known, and not only that we can know, that we should know, that it's our right to know, that we deserve to know. And this is one of the many battles that Christians face. Because sometimes the answer is, I don't know. And the person listening to us will not accept that answer. Again, that's not allowed in their worldview. They must know. But in their demand for knowing, they've lost their wonder, they've lost their enchantment, and they've lost God. Brothers and sisters, we are living in a fairy tale, and I know non-believers would hear me say that and laugh at me because they think Christianity is just that. It's a fairy tale. It's not real. It's all made up. It's some ridiculous book. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this world that we live in, this very thing that we call reality. It has the same principles as the made-up stories we read. And the author of this world has created some things, has made some rules, has set some boundaries, and our only job is to be like the child and accept it as it is. We don't need to cynically question it all and reduce it all and ask why God did what he did. We have to sit back and marvel at the fact that he did it. I'm one of those people. I want to know why. I ask why about everything. But sometimes I just have to say, I don't know why. But isn't it amazing? Isn't God awesome? God has provided some answers for our adult curiosity. But what it ultimately comes down to is the faith of a child. The child doesn't question why the carriage turns into a pumpkin at midnight. That's just the way it is. So why this earth? Why sin? Why temptation? Why grace and mercy? Why Christ and the cross? Why salvation? Why reconciliation? Why baptism? Why the church? It's just the way it is. And it's amazing. It's awesome. Let the children alone, and do not hinder them from coming to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. I hope you'll ponder these things. I hope you'll look around the world and see an awesome God. And of course say why, but also say, maybe I don't know why, but I still see God, and it's amazing. I hope all of you have a great week. Stay safe, and we'll see you on Sunday.